On March 9th, 2025, about an hour before I planned to lock up the shop, a white Tacoma backed into my bay with a check engine light glowing and a plastic bag of receipts on the passenger seat. The owner wasn't panicked. He was proud. He'd just done his own tune-up over the weekend: coils, plugs, an air fuel sensor, an oil filter, the works, and saved himself, by his math, almost $400 in parts versus what the dealer wanted. Then the truck started stumbling on the highway 2 days later. He looked at me and said the line I've heard 1,000 times. "I bought all the right parts. How is it running worse than before?" Today, I'm going to tell you exactly why that happens, and why on a Toyota specifically, the brand on the box matters more than almost anyone tells you. Because here's the thing he didn't know, and the thing most owners never find out until they're standing in my bay with a bag of receipts. There are a handful of parts on these trucks where aftermarket doesn't mean a cheaper version of the same thing. It means a worse copy of a part Toyota never made in the first place. Let me explain what I mean, because this is the part the parts counter guy will never say out loud. Toyota doesn't actually manufacture most of the components people think of as Toyota parts. The sensors, the coils, the plugs, a huge share of what lives under your hood, those are built by a small group of specialist suppliers. Denso, Aisin, NGK. Toyota engineers the system, then hands the spec to companies that have been making these exact pieces for decades. So when you buy a genuine Toyota oxygen sensor, you're often buying a Denso sensor in a Toyota box. And when you buy the cheap eBay special instead, you're not avoiding the overpriced dealer markup. You're walking away from the actual manufacturer and handing your engine to whoever underbid them. I've been turning wrenches on Toyotas for over 2 decades. I've watched these trucks go 300,000 miles on original drivetrains, and I can tell you that 9 times out of 10, when a Tundra or a 4Runner or a Tacoma suddenly starts running like garbage right after a part swap, the problem isn't the engine, it's what got bolted to it. So let's go through the 5 parts you should never, ever buy aftermarket on a Toyota, and number 3 is the one that can quietly turn a routine oil change into a destroyed engine. Number 5. The ignition coils. Every cylinder on your Toyota has a coil sitting on top of it, and its only job is to fire the spark plug at exactly the right instant, thousands of times a minute, in a sealed environment full of heat and vibration. Denso and NGK build the coils Toyota uses, and they are tuned to a very specific resistance and a very specific connector fit. Here's what happens when you go cheap. The aftermarket coil has slightly different internal resistance. The connector does not seat quite the same. And the engine control unit, the engine's brain, starts seeing a spark event that does not match what it expects. So you get a misfire code, P0301, P0302, on down the line. The driver swaps the coil again. The code comes back. They swap it to a different cylinder. Now the misfire follows the coil. Or worse, it does not, and now they are chasing a ghost. I've had trucks come in where the owner replaced all 6 coils with a bargain set off the internet and ended up with more misfires than they started with. The frustrating part is the coil usually still works. It fires. It just does not fire the way a Toyota expects, and a Toyota engine is unusually sensitive to that. The fix every time is the same. Put a Denso coil back on it, clear the codes, and the stumble disappears. Stick with Denso or NGK. That is not brand snobbery. That is the company that built the original. Number 4. The oxygen and air-fuel ratio sensors. This one costs people more money than almost anything else on the list. A bad one doesn't break. It lies. Your Toyota has sensors in the exhaust whose entire purpose is to tell the ECU how much oxygen is in the exhaust stream, dozens of times a second, so the computer can trim the fuel mixture perfectly. The upstream sensor on a modern Toyota is an air-fuel ratio sensor, and it's a precision instrument. Denso makes them. They switch fast, they read accurately, and they survive the heat. A cheap aftermarket sensor does something insidious. It reads a little slow, it drifts. It tells the ECU the engine is running lean when it isn't, so the computer dumps in more fuel to compensate. Now your fuel economy falls off a cliff, the truck runs rich. And here's the kicker, that extra unburned fuel runs straight into your catalytic converter and cooks it. A $20 sensor can take out a converter that costs you well over $1,000 to replace. And the check engine light often comes back even after you fixed it, because the new cheap sensor is no better than the old failing one. On a Toyota, this is the one component almost every experienced tech will tell you to never gamble on. Buy the Denso. It's the same sensor the factory used. Number 3, and this is the one that can actually destroy your engine, the oil filter. I know. An oil filter feels like the most disposable thing on the truck. It's a spin-on can. How much can possibly be different? Let me tell you what's inside a genuine Toyota filter that a lot of cheap ones leave out and why it matters so much. Inside that little canister, there's a silicone flap called an anti-drainback valve. Its job is simple and absolutely critical. When you shut the engine off, that valve keeps oil trapped inside the filter instead of letting it all drain back down into the pan. Why does that matter? Because the instant you start the engine the next morning, before the oil pump can build pressure, that trapped oil is right there at the top, ready to flow. Without it, you get a dry start. The engine spins for a moment with no oil reaching the bearings and the timing components. A Toyota filter uses a high-temperature silicone valve that stays flexible and seals every time. A lot of the cheap aftermarket cans either use a stiff valve that quits sealing after a few heat cycles, or they don't have a real one at all. People have cut these filters open side by side and found a flat bottom where the valve should be. Here's why I called this the engine killer, and I am not being dramatic. On several Toyota engines, the filter is mounted in a position where if that valve fails, the filter drains overnight. On startup, the engine runs for a second or two, completely dry up top while it waits for the filter to fill and pressure to build. Do that once, and you are probably fine. Do it every single morning for years, and you are slowly grinding away the bearings, and on chain engines starving the timing chain tensioner, and a loose chain on cold startup can rattle, jump, or in a worst case chew into the cover and bend valves. The driver never hears a dramatic failure. There is no warning light that says your oil filter has no check valve. The engine just wears out years early, and the owner blames the mileage. There is a second problem too. A genuine Toyota filter holds far more filter media, sometimes close to double the cheap stuff, and it has a thicker can that does not deform when you wrench it off. The bargain filters can clog, and when they clog badly enough, the bypass dumps unfiltered, gritty oil straight through your engine. This is the one place on the whole truck where I will tell you, flatly, do not save the $4. Buy the genuine Toyota filter or a top-tier Denso. Your engine is trusting that little silicone flap every single morning. Number 2. The mass airflow sensor. This is the part that measures exactly how much air is entering your engine so the engine control unit can deliver the correct amount of fuel. It is a tiny, delicate, heated element sitting in the intake stream. Denso builds the ones Toyota uses with a very specific calibration. The whole fuel strategy of the engine is built around trusting that number. When you put in a cheap MAF, you get a sensor that reads air mass slightly wrong across the range. Not wrong enough to fail outright, wrong enough to lie. The ECU builds its fuel trims around bad data, and now you've got a truck that hesitates on acceleration, idles unevenly, gets worse mileage, and sometimes throws a lean or rich code that nothing seems to fix. I've watched owners replace plugs, coils, even the fuel pump chasing a stumble that turned out to be a $40 knockoff air sensor feeding the computer fiction. Same rule as everything else on this list. The OEM supplier is Denso, and a Denso MAF is the exact sensor the engine was tuned around. The cheap one isn't a deal. It's a slow, expensive wild goose chase. Number 1, the spark plugs, and this is where it gets genuinely dangerous. You would think a spark plug would be the safest thing to buy generic. It is the opposite, and not for the reason you would expect. The problem is not aftermarket plugs as a category, it is counterfeits. Toyota engines run Denso and NGK Iridium plugs, and those two brands are the most counterfeited spark plugs on the planet. The fakes flood eBay, Amazon third-party sellers, the cheap corners of the internet, and they have gotten frighteningly good. They clone the printing, the box, the part number. People who have installed them side by side with genuine plugs can barely tell the difference by eye. But the fake is wrong where it counts. The gap comes out of spec from the factory. The internal resistance is all over the place. Owners have measured counterfeit plugs, reading wildly off from the value the real ones are supposed to hold. And the electrode that is supposed to be a fine iridium tip often is not real iridium at all. So what happens? The truck starts stumbling under load, bucking on hills, usually with no check engine light at first. And the owner suspects everything except the plugs they just installed because they are brand new. Denso themselves have warned about this. A counterfeit plug can overheat under load, and an overheating plug can melt and drop material into the cylinder. Now you have real internal engine damage from a part that cost you $8. The plugs are not even the expensive part to buy right. The danger is entirely about where you buy them. Get your Denso or NGK Iridiums from a real distributor, a dealer, or a reputable supplier, never the cheapest listing from a random seller. A genuine set will outlast a counterfeit 5-to-1 and will not risk your cylinders. So let me tie this together because there is an uncomfortable truth underneath this whole list. The reason these cheap parts exist and sell so well is that the savings are real and immediate, and the damage is slow and invisible. You feel $40 leave your wallet today. You do not feel the bearing wear, the cooked catalytic converter, the timing chain stretch, the melted electrode, until it becomes a 4-figure repair and no one can tell you exactly when it started. The parts industry is built on that gap. A genuine filter does not look impressive on a shelf next to one that is $3 cheaper. No one is standing there explaining that one of them has a silicone valve protecting your engine every cold morning and the other one has a flat piece of metal. And here is what I want you to take away, because it is simpler than the whole industry makes it sound. On a Toyota, the genuine part is usually a Denso, an ASIN, or an NGK component in a factory box. You are not paying for a logo. You are paying for the company that actually engineered and built the thing to the spec your engine was designed around. On most cars, OEM versus aftermarket is a real debate. On these specific 5 parts on a Toyota, it is not. Coils, oxygen sensors, the oil filter, the mass airflow sensor, and your plugs. That is where the cheap version costs you the truck. That Tacoma owner with the bag of receipts. We pulled his counterfeit plugs and his bargain air fuel sensor, put the real Denso parts back in, dropped in a genuine filter, and the truck ran like new within a day. He saved $400 on a Saturday and almost spent $2,000 by Friday. Do not be that guy. If this changed how you think about what goes into your truck, hit that like button so more Toyota owners see it before they are standing in a shop wondering what went wrong. Subscribe if you want the stuff the parts counter will not tell you every single week. And drop a comment. Have you ever gotten burned by a cheap part that turned out to cost you way more than it saved? Those stories help people more than you know. Because the most expensive part you will ever buy is not the genuine one. It is the bargain that takes your engine with it.